Hello, I am Dr. Jehan Marku.
And I'm Dr. Andrew Peterson, and we are the editors of the Cannabis Innovation Series. And we'd like to welcome you to yet another Experts in the Field interview. This volume of the series is focused on the regulated cannabis and hemp market navigation, examining business, public health, and research challenges.
We are here today to talk about biotech, public health, and research challenges. With us today is Dr. Ethan Russo, founder, CEO of Credo Science. He is a world-renowned clinician, scientist, educator, and entrepreneur in the cannabis space.
So for me, it's interesting to talk with someone with such experience and exposure in the cannabis field. So Dr. Russo, if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit more about yourself, about Credo Science, and how did your career path get you there? We're here.
Sure. First, it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm a neurologist by training and went through standard pharmacology training, et cetera, et cetera. However, by the time I was in practice in 1990, for 7 years at that point, I really became disillusioned with the kinds of results that we were getting with conventional medicine. Neurology is a tough thing. You don't often succeed on your first trial of a medication. And so it was really a revolving door of people coming back to treat the chronic pain or seizures or migraines. And it was sort of the drug of the month club. So at that point, I really rekindled an interest that I had in medicinal plants, which, to shorten the story up, led me to the rainforest in Peru and on sabbatical in 1995. But when I came back, it was 1996. It was Prop 215 in California, leading to the revolution in medicinal access to cannabis. And I quickly became involved in the system, trying to do research and finding I was being thwarted by the government. But a new love affair began in terms of the study of cannabis and the endocannabinoid system, and it basically led to a second career. Um, so after doing a bunch of writing, editing, consulting, in 2003, I came on full time for 11 years with GW Pharmaceuticals and the development programs for the pharmaceutical cannabis-based medicines, Sativex and Epidiolex. Subsequently, I was with a couple of private companies, culminating in 2020 with the development of Credo Science right before the pandemic. So that set us back a bit. But Credo Science is devoted to making cannabis safer and better. We have 7 of our own patents pending, various technologies, running the gamut from a diagnostic test for cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome to extraction techniques and development of what we hope will be newer and better formulations that are cannabis-based, both for the supplement market and pharmaceutical markets.
Wow.
Wow.
The average cannabis and hemp company in the industry doesn't seem interested in conducting research, science, publishing data, or intellectual property development, which is kind of all these things you've touched upon. But how do companies make a decision to invest in cannabis research, and how might that change in the future?
Well, right now it's pretty easy. Nobody's investing. Um, so there's a simple explanation. Um, it may be an old figure, but as of a couple of years ago, 85% of the investment in cannabis-based companies was solely in publicly traded companies. We've chosen to be private and will remain so just as a matter of control. I think part of the problem in the situation is when you're publicly trading, you are really responding to what the stockholders want rather than what the industry might want or what science and medicine require. So we're looking at this from a very different standpoint. And, we feel it's the only way to go. Part of this is motivated by the fact that I'm old now. I've had a lot of lousy bosses in my life. Currently, I'm the boss of this company, and if there's a problem, I've only myself to blame. So it's better that way.
So I sort of related a little bit. You said that most of them are publicly traded, and you're privately traded. What's making them publicly traded? Why they go in that direction?
Well, I think basically, again, it's a philosophy I don't espouse. I understand the need to be publicly traded, but the idea seems to be that we have an idea that we can sell, and we're going to try and make a bunch of money and then sell it off. And that's what people do. But to pick on a specific company, Canopy spent $50 million acquiring other companies through mergers and acquisitions, and very little concrete came out of it. So some people made a bunch of money. I can't see that a lot was produced or the public health was improved as a result of all these machinations.
So I'm wondering a little bit then, because recently the Department of Health and Human Services recommended cannabis to be placed in a Schedule 3. Does that affect you, or will it affect your work? And even would it affect some of the other ones, the publicly traded ones?
Uh, Probably not affecting me much at all. Other companies, yes, but mainly in terms of my understanding is it would ease up some of the banking restrictions. It would also, for some, improve access to cannabis for research. However, I think that the premise of the exercise is pretty faulty. Schedule 3 in the Controlled Substances Act really refers to an FDA approved pharmaceutical that would have limited drug abuse liability. It really doesn't apply to cannabis at all. So it's possible that this would be interpreted as being restricted to drugs that were made from cannabis that were already FDA approved. Right now, there's only one of those, Epidiolex, which is 97% pure CBD. Sativex, that I mentioned before, is approved in 30 countries, but extra USA. So I think if it were misapplied, it could actually make things worse for the rest of the cannabis industry. Potentially, it might be possible to eliminate all the commerce in CBD products and other products that are currently available. So I just don't understand it. My personal feeling is that cannabis should be descheduled and then regulated for safety and other considerations. So it might be akin to what's done with alcohol, but should be distinct.
Very interesting. And I think with some of these changes we might see in regulations, as cannabis moves down the scheduling pathway, I don't think Schedule 3 will be its final destination, if indeed it does end up there. Um, you know, I'm thinking about as the industry matures, we might see different partnerships. We've already seen companies start to partner with universities. We've seen beverage companies partner with cannabis companies. We've seen ingredient suppliers. Now, what I wanted to ask you is to peer into your crystal ball and maybe talk about what might a business partnership or relationship between a cannabis company and a pharmaceutical company look like? I mean, would the pharmaceutical company buy the rights to all their products just like they buy portfolios of small biotech, or would it be more like a Rite Aid type over the counter model? I don't know. Would be curious to get your perspective,
Sure.
what you think about that.
Well, any of these things might be possible. A good model would be that from Canada, which is a lot more supportive of research in general on cannabis research in particular. They have a program, as one nice example, called MyTax, in which a graduate student or a postdoctoral fellow can get half of their salary supplied by the Canadian government, with the other 50% supplied by the private company underwriting the research. We don't have anything like that in the United States. Basically, everything is funneled through the National Institutes of Health, which has really been strangled politically. I won't say which party, but people can likely infer. Um, Additionally, certainly it is the case over the last 4 decades that the vast majority of research in cannabis has been devoted to its harms rather than its pharmaceutical benefits. So that remains a problem. Um, Additionally, it's very hard to work with American universities because of their insistence or requirement to impose vast overhead expenses. Just as a comparison, I can tell you that GW Pharmaceuticals, for whom I worked, didn't have these restrictions in other countries. So they had many collaborators, uh, particularly in European countries, that would get funding from them and do the research without 50 or 60% or whatever the figure would be being siphoned off by the university for overhead. So basically, none of the research that GW underwrote um, that really told us most of what we know about cannabidiol, cannabigerol, et cetera, came from this underwriting by a private company, but almost none of it was done in the United States.
Wow. So it seems like incentivizing these partnerships will be key, because doing it through traditional pathways where 60% of the overhead's taken in an industry where you still can't take tax write-offs just may not be sustainable.
No, I think it's damn near impossible.
But that's where if you reschedule to a 3, the tax benefits, the 280E doesn't apply anymore, so that might be a benefit. But still, 60% of the total grant money going to some university is an exorbitant amount
Sure.
for it. So um, I want to kind of change this a little bit and think a bit more about, because you mentioned some of this about some of the harms that occur and some of the benefits that occur. How should cannabis businesses balance like consumer safety versus sales? I mean, right now they're struggling because they need to make sales to be able to make some money, but then consumer safety becomes an issue. How do they balance that now, and then how do you see that coming out in the future?
Well, it all depends on how the rules that are made by politicians come through in the situation. I don't think that it is advisable or possible to shortcut safety. That's got to be number one, along with quality control. We're just not willing to compromise on that score. Um, Now, obviously, it adds to the cost if you're requiring a certificate of analysis on anything sold to a consumer, or that you're requiring pesticide screening and screening for heavy metals and all this. It adds up, but um, it's a situation where no one in good conscience should be selling product to consumers without knowing that it's going to be safe when used as directed. Um, Obviously, there can be limiting factors if people get too much THC. Most of the other components of cannabis are extremely low in toxicity and risk of adverse events. But if it's not made properly and is contaminated in some fashion, it wouldn't matter how good the base ingredients were. There can't be any compromise on safety. And whatever that ends up costing, the consumer is going to need to bear. Hopefully, there return in terms of the benefit that they receive will make that worthwhile.
I really like what you said about there's no compromise on safety. And, some people in the cannabis space, I think especially younger professionals getting into the space, are looking at the industry and kind of scratching their heads because one company seems to be really into research and applying data and others could care less. And so I have been seeing more young entrepreneurs going into biotech because they can, as you said, raise that private capital, avoid the costs of doing research with the academic collaborator. But we're still in a period of change, like a rapid change where things change every week in the cannabis space, it seems like. So I was wondering if you could just opine a little bit on advice for young biotech entrepreneurs looking at maybe going the similar GW Pharma route that you went, or perhaps trying to develop their own cannabinoid product, whether a natural product or synthetic product, and taking it to traditional routes for federal approval.
Sure. Well, it's a situation that there are always going to be three echelons of activity with respect to cannabis. One is cannabis herb, which usually is going to be in the form of flower. Then there are the more refined products that would include your CBD products and oils that presumably will continue to be sold over the counter. And finally, the top echelon would be pharmaceutical materials that go through the regulatory process with the FDA and other bodies around the world. Um, I think people make a mistake when they think that one aspect of the market can eliminate the others. They're always going to be there and they need to coexist. We're working in all three areas. And that is because we think that they all have their place and role towards the public health. Um, so, in terms of advice, I think that there are two ways to gain experience. One is through academic study, and the other one is on the job. It remains the case that there are very few universities with programs. I had mentioned before we began that I lectured at Humboldt in California on Friday, and they've developed an undergraduate major in cannabis studies. Right now, it's sociologically based. I think that they would like to expand that into more technical aspects, but they're not currently allowed to grow. If there were cannabis legalization, they could have a botany program and more commercial aspects. There also is a master's program at in Maryland at the university.
Yep.
So these are really good opportunities. Um, Otherwise, people are learning on the job, um, usually, under black market conditions, or at least until recently, most places. Again, there are a lot more opportunities abroad. I mean, my life is a personal example. I've spent most of the last 27 years in which I've been engaged in cannabis research and development, working for foreign companies. And that was through necessity. I just couldn't do the kind of work that I felt was required in the United States.
That is, really fascinating stuff, and I know that you've answered a lot of questions from young professionals about what they should do and how they should engage in this. But I like what you said is that there's a lot of education and certification opportunities out there. There's a lot of ways to get experience, and don't be afraid to go abroad. Don't be afraid to get experience that might help you with your pathway forward. So I guess that brings me to a follow-up question is, what you have a lot of publications out there, prolific writer about cannabis. I was wondering if there is a resource that you find yourself sharing most often with other curious cannabis minds? Is there a book? Is there a podcast episode? Maybe it's something else that you find yourself sharing most often when people say, "Hey, what do you have about cannabis that I should read or I should listen to?"
Well, there are a number of good books at this point by Dustin Sulak, Bonnie Goldstein, my business partner, Nisha Whiteley. All of these are available online. In terms of where I point people the most often, it's actually my personal website, ethanrusso.org, at the library tab. So I've put all of my published peer-reviewed articles and book chapters there. Because it's my personal site, there are no copyright issues and people can download and print those as they wish. So if people are interested in the work that I've done, I would send them there first. Because again, it amounts to a lot of paper available. So yeah, I hope people will avail themselves of that opportunity, and I appreciate the question.
Well, I think I'm going to go there and check out what you have. I didn't realize you had that library of resources, so do appreciate that. I think a lot of people will after they hear about it from this and other sources. So thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So for us, Dr. Russo, we are at the end. We've finished the questions that we are interested in. Any final comments you want to say for the audience?
No, again, I appreciate this opportunity. I like the work that you're doing and hope that be very successful in reaching a wide audience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming out. We appreciate your time.